Thanks for tuning in to F1 coverage on Proline TV. CJ Radune from RotoWire.com joining me, Greg DePalma here. And CJ, we're back after having the week off, and they are traveling. And I'm referencing, of course, they as F1, the whole F1 family coming into the United States, Miami in particular. So this could be a very interesting week.
This was an interesting week last year. This was the week that Red Bull and Max Verstappen kind of let the prize slip through their fingers and let Lando Norris through. And then it was everything they could do to be able to hang on for the rest of the season. So this was definitely a turning point in last year's season. I'm not so sure it's going to be the same this year. It's been pretty competitive this year. McLaren's kind of in their own realm with Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris, but it's this season has started kind of like last season ended, and it seems like a couple of teams are starting to catch up with McLaren as well. Unfortunately, I just don't think it's necessarily going to be this weekend.
Well, we were talking the last time we were on this show before the Bahrain event regarding, well, when could we see a change? Was Red Bull done? Well, no. And you explained that just like last year, maybe Miami would be a week where we could see some changes at the top. And lo and behold, Max Verstappen and company at Red Bull decided, well, maybe they didn't want to wait for those changes because they sure made it interesting at Bahrain. Really made you sweat with your pick of Piastri and also the winning car of McLaren at minus 450. But a win's a win, and you hit both of those. But that was interesting. And, of course, it took a crash by Norris in qualifying to screw around with that because he started 10th and yet still was able to find his way within a few laps right into the mix, into the top 3 or top 4. It didn't take him long, but it just showed you that you guys still got to deal with a few things, and he just was not able to handle that well. What did you think about Bahrain, first of all? Because, it was really Piastri and Max for a long time there.
Well, Saudi Arabia, not Bahrain, but
okay, that was that last week. Okay,
same general region, but Saudi Arabia was the last one. And the way I recall saying it was that I anticipated Red Bull to bring their upgrades to Imola, which is the next race. You are correct. They did not wait. They started bringing them actually in Saudi Arabia, and that definitely made a difference. And a lot of the commentary that they said after the race was that they've started to figure out the right direction for this car. So I think over the next couple of races, we're going to see them continue to be close and inch a little bit closer. What I really remember saying ahead of Saudi Arabia was I just wonder if Lando Norris and McLaren shoot themselves in the feet again, which is exactly what Lando Norris ended up doing, and then left Oscar Piastri to fend off Red Bull's Max Verstappen, which admittedly was much closer, I think, than everybody expected to be at Saudi Arabia. But I think they're going to be close again here at Miami. This is a place where Max Verstappen has done extremely well. This is a place where Red Bull has done extremely well. He being Max Verstappen, won the very first 2 races here. He started 3rd and 9th in those 2 races, so he didn't have to start on the front row. He came from behind and won. And by the way, last year, he was actually, remember, in the lead until he made that mistake and went over the chicane and damaged the bottom of his car, which made him lose the speed for the rest of the race, which is what allowed Lando Norris to catch him, pass him, and go on to get that first win. And that was the start of McLaren's turnaround for the season. They chased Max Verstappen all the way till the end last year. So I think when it's, if I'm remembering this correctly, the adage this season has been when it's really hot, it's really good for McLaren. When it's not so hot, it's pretty good for Red Bull.
Does that include being at night because it cools off?
It would include being at night. However, obviously at night it's going to be cooler. So keep that in mind for Singapore. Saudi Arabia during the day would have been significantly hotter than it would have been at night during the race. And obviously we saw Red Bull do pretty well, but also Saudi Arabia is not very hard on tires. So the interesting thing about Miami, you would think that it would be hot. It's Florida, right?
Oh
Typically
yeah.
very warm, of course. But this track is also not very tough on tires either. So Pirelli this week is actually bringing a softer compound than they brought last year. However, the track still just isn't tough on tires. And by the way, the weather report for Sunday's race, keep in mind this is a sprint weekend. So we'll have a sprint on Saturday and we'll have the full race on Sunday. But on Sunday, there's a very high likelihood that it's going to rain, which means temperature is not going to be a factor at all, which puts it more in the driver's hands, which I think all plays into the hands of Max Verstappen and Red Bull being able to really challenge McLaren again this weekend.
Were there any weather conditions in the first three races?
I'm trying to remember if we definitely had rain in some sessions. I don't know that we had I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, because as you said, I mean, to see the starting position, even though it's only been three races, but wow, 5th, 9th, and 3rd. What is this, NASCAR?
Not quite.
No. So yeah, that's very unusual. So we'll see if that continues. Speaking of pole position, let's recall over at Saudi Arabia that Max, what was that? The pole position was who was on the pole? Max or Piastri?
It was Max. And
okay.
Before the race, I said the only chance I see Max Verstappen and Red Bull having a chance against McLaren is if Max does the perfect lap in qualifying, gets on pole, and then leads to turn 1. He accomplished one of those two things.
Yeah.
Didn't quite finish the second.
Yeah, because he only led that by 1/100th of a second. And that put him on the pole. But yeah, he had sort of like a similar issue starting that Norris had the week before. It cost them both. So, because that was it. I mean, that penalty.
That was it.
He was never able to get closer again.
Absolutely correct. And it was basically with Norris's mistake and not being able to get a good qualifying position there as well. He was effectively out of it before it even started. So that left it all just to Piastri and McLaren to just not make any mistakes. And that's really what they did. And yeah, Red Bull was pretty close. I'm surprised actually that Verstappen was still, like, the margin of victory wasn't as great as it has been. And that's why I think, again, that the upgrades that Red Bull brought, they were small upgrades. They weren't the full package, but they did bring upgrades to Saudi Arabia. I suspect they're going to bring some more here to Miami, and then they'll have the full package at Imola. So I do think that the words that they've been saying, that they've found the direction to go with this car, I think that's very true at this point.
Now, before we preview the race this week, keep in mind, if you have any questions, comments, let us know. We are building something here relatively new. Obviously, we haven't been on the air previewing or talking about F1 like a lot of other channels for years. We're never going to be at that rate on some of the highly popular ones, but that's because we're just not an F1 channel. We've got a lot of different sports we're covering here on ProLine, but we would like to get to a certain level. We do have other shows that have some popularity. Matter of fact, I just recorded a live Kentucky Derby show last night, and we already have close to 2,000 views on that one. So, we're growing. We've got just too much firepower here on this channel regarding professional analysts, people in the, online, you get people who, and I'm okay with this. I'm not trying to, denigrate people, but it's an opportunity for people who have regular jobs to do their passion and reach people. And if they do it really well, they get follows. But a lot of people here that are here on the channel have a profession in sports. And I think that's the one thing that we're really banking on. So F1 is the sport that we would really like to keep promoting. And so definitely subscribe. The whole comments, all things like that also help us. So we appreciate that. And I mentioned all this because we did get a comment from the last show. So it's been a couple of weeks, but we had talked about the penalty that we weren't sure exactly what was going on with Russell that real interesting penalty situation that they were talking about, and they were very concerned that Russell was going to end up maybe getting knocked out a second, and then it just didn't happen, and the announcers seemed surprised by that. Well, Save 919 said he thought the Russell penalty situation was DRS,
and he was right. He was right. They were just. I remember not remembering specifically at that moment what Russell's issue was. But there were so many, and that was Bahrain. There were so many track limits violations that went through that field, and so many warnings, and so many drivers fell afoul of that, and so many people came up so close to the edge that I just naturally thought that it was Russell falling into that trap as well. But yes, as a matter of fact, it was DRS. I believe Russell said after the fact that he was checking the systems on the car, trying things out, and ended up inadvertently triggering DRS, and then took it back out. But upon review, or at least I should say, the steward said that they would look at it after the race, and then after the race they looked at it and determined that no advantage was gained, and so therefore no penalty was assessed, and he was able to keep that good podium finishing position, which unfortunately they weren't able to replicate again in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, couple of things I want to share for everybody. We've talked about the newsletters that you can get here, which I think, again, Prime Tire from The Athletic, they do a really good job kind of updating what's going on. How tariffs will impact Formula One. Yeah. I'm not sure why this is something, but, if you just read here, let's see. Well, Haas F1 claims no impact. Its parent company, Haas Automation, is already suffering a dramatic decrease in demand and has cut overtime, stopped hiring, and reduced production. Is this just one of those things that, I don't know, but I don't know if this story came by in the off week. Maybe it did. This is like an off week kind of article. No, actually it happened 4 weeks ago, almost a month ago.
Interesting. Yeah, Haas would have been the one that popped to mind if you mentioned tariffs and Formula One in the same context. And the only reason why, again, is not because of Haas, the race team, but because Haas actually makes a lot of the manufacturing equipment that teams use for design and just production of parts and things like that. They're a very big supplier across the world. So again, I'm not surprised that they would be feeling immediate impact because they would be, part of the tariffs.
Yeah.
So from a parent company perspective, and the deep pockets that go into funding a Formula One team, certainly you've got that issue. But I think that's still a stretch because if you recall, and I think we talk about it pretty often, is that there's a cost cap in Formula One. So you know exactly what your limit to spend is. So as long as you can cover those obligations and you cover them smartly, you're able to compete, whether you're tariffed or not. So I think that article is a little bit of a stretch. We can talk tax philosophy and world trade.
That would be exciting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, we can do a weekly podcast on that alone. But I would talk Formula One.
Yeah. That wouldn't help us trying to build an audience here.
That's no, I don't think so. If people needed to fall asleep, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That.
Tune in 12 o'clock at midnight. All right. So also Oscar Piastri taking over the championship lead. A couple of things here. He was the first Australian to lead the world championship in 15 years. Let's see, 24 years, 15 days old, the seventh youngest driver to ever lead the championship. Here's some of the younger ones. And a lot of these are drivers that have been around lately, which I guess is not a surprise. Drivers nowadays are just they have so many advantages that the drivers years ago just did not have it. And I'm talking technology.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think probably the most interesting thing about Piastri and the way that he started this season is that if you look back in Formula One history, through the same amount of races to start a year, the person who has started, or all the drivers that have started, at the same rate with wins and points as Piastri, they've either won the championship that year or they were already champions before. So I think we are seeing championship performance from Oscar Piastri, and a lot of that has to go down to McLaren and the fact that, again, I've said it many times, they have head and shoulders above the rest of the field the best car this year. The question, and we talked about this ahead of Saudi Arabia and a little bit today, is how quickly can the other teams catch them? And Red Bull seems to be closest. Red Bull is saying that they've found the upgrades that they need. They found the direction. The next 2 weeks are going to be pretty important to watch to see how close they can either maintain that gap to McLaren or maybe even catch up with them a little bit more. Looks like Ferrari have a lot of work to do, unfortunately, despite Leclerc's podium finish at Saudi Arabia. They seem to be floundering a little bit. And Mercedes just continues to just be the most consistent executing team out there. They make so few mistakes and they're so good at what they do. Just because of that, they call the right strategy. They don't make mistakes on pit road. They just go out and they execute, and that earns them points every single week. So unless, again, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari are shooting themselves in the foot, I think McLaren's to lose until Red Bull likely catches them here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're and deservedly so that we keep talking, or the media just keeps bringing up, well, what is Max? What Red Bull? What do they have to do to catch McLaren? It's like, well, it's a couple other manufacturers here. It's not just Red Bull. So, okay, let's take a look at the odds this week for the race in Miami. And now that it's getting interesting with Piastri being the man and Max making a statement maybe last week, who do you think is going to be the favorite? And what do you think the odds are going to be?
I think the odds are going to be maybe 150 and 200, and it's going to be Piastri and then Norris.
Plus?
Okay.
Oh. Soothsayer, if it's 200.
I might have to actually go.
150.
Oh, darn it. Well, close enough. Yeah. Piastri, I think, should be the favorite, to be quite honest with you. I think Lando's getting a little bit of a bump because he was so good here last year. Obviously, this was a track where he turned things around. Plus, maybe everyone is also thinking that after 2 or 3 weeks in a row of complete knuckleheaded moves, either from him or the team, that it can't happen yet again. However, I think at this point, with just one win under his belt and Oscar Piastri now with 3, I think Piastri has clearly segregated himself from his teammates. So I think more of the resources are going to be going toward Piastri versus Norris. So I think when you've got a situation where you're at a flyaway race and you've got some special parts that you can put on a car, you're probably going to put him on your championship leader, and that week is Oscar Piastri. So I think Piastri should be the favorite. Lando Norris wouldn't be far behind him. My choice this week, top choice to win, is going to be Piastri, because I think got to get themselves smart enough to be able to start putting the weight behind their championship leader. They have always, or more recently, been a team that have said that they're going to let their drivers race. However, I think at this point, when you've got a 2-win advantage, it's early in the season, you see Red Bull catching up, you've got to start giving a little bit more toward your championship leader, and that's Piastri.
Okay, so all of a sudden, Piastri is the man. Okay, well, it's early. We'll see. Where do you think Max is? What number?
Max is going to be 3rd. I'm going to guess he's +5. I'm thinking +5, +6. I'll say +5, though.
Oh! What are you, some sort of an analyst?
I'm just going to go buy my lottery ticket today.
Come on now. Somebody should pay you to do this.
I wonder how that works. Yeah.
All right. So it's 5-1. Again, this is like what we talked about a couple weeks ago. It's not just you have to beat one of them. You got to get the other one too. And if one makes a mistake, like we saw a couple weeks ago, you still got to deal with the other one. And that is the problem for Max.
That is the problem for Max. But when you're talking almost almost 4 times, between 3 and 4 times the payout. And given that he was only 2 seconds off in Saudi Arabia at a place where you can pass, plus he got pole at Saudi Arabia, it's more difficult to pass at Miami. There are 3 DRS zones at this track. And by the way, this is a track I told you before we started, but this is a track that I think that all the drivers do not like because it's shoehorned into the parking lot area and in between freeways and the football stadium down in Miami.
Why did they like that?
Just not a rhythm track. It's just not one that they get
boring
and really enjoy. Yeah, there's just not a whole heck of a lot that they can do with it to make themselves competitive, difficult to pass, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Verstappen, again, stands a really good chance if he can get himself on pole and if he can lead his way into turn 1 and avoid getting a penalty this time. I think he'd be able to beat both. So first choice, Piastri, I think they are still the car and team to beat. Second choice this week, I think you got to go with Max Verstappen at a +5. They're closing the gap.
Okay, so you actually would take Max over Lando as a second pick.
Absolutely would. If I was forced to choose between Norris and Verstappen this week, I would take Verstappen.
Okay, and then here's the rest.
Exactly as I said, George Russell and Mercedes, execute. Chances of winning, probably not very good. However, I did mention that the rain is likely to come during the race on Sunday, so that may throw a wrench in the works, except that when you consider one of the best drivers in the rain is Max Verstappen, you've got to take that into consideration as well. That might open the door, though, for somebody like Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari to spring a surprise win. Hamilton did have the sprint win earlier this season. This is a sprint race weekend, so it'll be interesting to see if Ferrari is able to leverage that short stint speed to another sprint win, possibly a good qualifying position. I think their real chance, and mainly for Hamlin, would come Sunday if there's rain and they're able to take advantage of that.
Okay, so the sprint weekend, is there any advantages or disadvantages to any of the drivers?
I would say no, because they've changed the rules for the sprint weekend, or I guess the schedule of the sprint weekend for this year. So there are actually 2 Parc Fermé situations. So you're actually able to make changes from the sprint to the race. Last year in the sprint races, you weren't able to do that. So that would have favored the high-end teams that are able to nail their setups right away. Somebody like Max Verstappen and Red Bull, who they're trying to feel their way through and know that they need to make changes and make adjustments throughout the weekend in order to catch up. Maybe that benefits them a little bit more. However, with the sprint weekend, overall practice time for all of the teams is reduced. So it's a little bit different this year. It's not as predictive on Saturday as to what you'll see on Sunday because of the way that they've readjusted the way that the schedule rolls. So I think what you see on Saturday is not necessarily going to be the same on Sunday. And by the way, Sunday is likely to have rain anyway, whereas Saturday is not.
That's true. Again, if you had to grade those 3 drivers, those top 3, or even say the top 4 drivers with Russell in there, how would you rank them 1 through 4 as far as weather, off weather?
Weather-wise, in bad weather, I would put Max Verstappen 1. Probably I might put Russell 2nd, to be honest with you, because I think the tricky conditions of a wet race, number one, it opens the door to mistakes for drivers, but number 2, it opens the door for mistakes from the teams and calling the drivers in at the right time and putting on the right tires. And McLaren has failed at that so many times that I just don't trust them. So I'll put Verstappen 1st, Russell 2nd, Piastri 2nd, Norris 3rd or 4th.
Okay. So this is actually not sounding like a totally bad week to maybe risk going with Max or George.
Yeah, I think if you're going to, certainly at this point in the season, before the full upgrades come and before Red Bull actually does track down McLaren all the way, I think this is probably a week to seriously consider taking Verstappen, because I think there are a lot of things that go his direction. Number one, getting on pole and getting to that first turn. This is a different track than Saudi Arabia. He'd be better able to defend for the rest of the race. And then on top of that, if it's a wet race, I think that falls very much into his hands, Verstappen's.
And the sprint, is anything to do with qualifying?
No, they separated that.
Okay.
So there will be one practice session on Friday, sprint qualifying Friday afternoon, sprint race on Saturday, race qualifying Saturday afternoon, then Sunday race.
Okay. All right. Now, top 4. And here are the odds. Of course, you got a Piastri and Norris. That's big low numbers. Even Max has got a low number.
I like Hamilton, especially with the wet. I think that's a good one. Antonelli is Russell's teammate. He's been very consistent. Again, Mercedes just executing. So Antonelli there might be a good choice, but the clear standout here for me is Lewis Hamilton, especially in the wet.
Okay. And let's see, where are we going again? We're going to team props. And we're going to winning car. Okay. Oh, look, McLaren's odds have actually dropped a little bit. This is not like Max.
Don't choose McLaren for. Yeah, I would rather go with both drivers on the individual than this one at a -350, to be honest with you. And honestly, I'd take Max Verstappen over Red Bull at a +450 as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about that.
Yeah, would two 150s versus a -350? I'd have to do the math.
Yeah, I mean, because if you think about it, if you invest 200 on 350, then and obviously you got to think about winning. So you've got $200. But if you do 100 each, you're going to make more money. If one of actually you're going to make less money, but the deal here is. Which is not going to be, it's only going to be $50 less maybe. But the deal here is that you're not risking
right
700. You're only risking basically 200.
Right. Yep.
So that's the difference is, you take a little less. And of course, anybody that's going to get a bet this type of money is going to bet a lot more. It's the only way you're going to make money. You could probably put in $500, $1,000 investment kind of deal. But yeah, that's that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. So which way are you going to go here?
I would still do the individual drivers. Either.
Oh, so you wouldn't even do no winning car this week?
I would not do the winning car this week. I just think -350 for McLaren. If it were dry, probably makes a little bit more sense. I think it's going to be wet, and therefore you're looking at Red Bull Racing being the deal on just the team, and in which case, really, in reality, the only one that's
Max.
a driver that's going to win is Max, and you're getting better odds on him as a driver.
So you would probably be better off if, and again, going on how, because you've already got Piastri, and if you're going to only win that, so I guess we could look at it this way. If you what you're saying is you would rather add Norris, or would you rather take Max?
If I've already got Piastri,
yes,
I would rather add Max.
Okay,
or I'd rather take Max. Put it that way.
Okay, that sounds good. Because since we don't have a winning car, that's what we can do then. So Max is 500. Okay, no winning car. Do it that way. All right, because everybody wants to figure out how do I make some money here in F1, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, but since that car won, or since that winning manufacturer isn't all that great, keep in mind the Lewis Hamilton plus
265.
265 for a top 4. I think that's pretty good value, especially for him in the rain.
Yes. So that is also something to keep in mind, because even though you'll only win one of the two between Piastri or Max in this situation, you can also make money with Hamilton in the top 4. Okay. No break next week, correct?
No break. We head off to Imola, which should be the full complement of upgrades for Red Bull. We'll see how this weekend goes first, though. Yeah, Imola, and then I think we have a week off before we hit the streets of Monaco.
And then also, we'll be posting this video. You'll be seeing us when you see us, which is usually around Friday, just before Saturday. But you can check the comment section where we're going to go ahead and pin for you the link for F1 DFS picks, correct?
Correct. And actually, I have to correct myself. We do have a week off after Miami before we go to Imola. The back-to-back races are Imola and Monaco. So we do have a week off next week, but we will be hitting Imola next time out. And then my favorite race currently for the Formula One calendar, Streets of Monaco, Memorial Day weekend.
Okay, cool. And that's a big weekend, isn't it?
Big weekend. Yes. You have to
huge.
Start the day off with Monaco, head over to Indy for the Indy 500, and then finish it up with the Coke 600 at Charlotte.
Is Larson going to be in the 500 this year?
He is, yes. He was just out testing at Indianapolis just last week and crashed. So
okay.
Takuma Sato both crashed, but everybody was getting their testing in at Indianapolis on the oval in preparation for going out there in May. So yeah, Larson will be there trying to do the double again.
All right. Well, a few weeks before we really start hammering down that weekend, we'll have a lot of coverage there. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything that we have to say. And let us know if anything's on your mind, questions, comments, anything like that. We surely appreciate it. Get the ball rolling, so to speak. So we'll be back to talk more F1 in a couple of weeks when we come out of Miami and head to Imola. And in between that, if you want to check out our NASCAR coverage, you could do that as well. The show is already available on the channel. You can check that out. Texas is this week, and then Kansas is next week before we get more F1 coverage. So CJ, appreciate your time as always.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see everybody in 2 weeks.